right, ladies and gentlemen, we're back here on G for G. I'm Napalm Dawn, and today we're doing a follow-up video to a video that I had done. I guess you really can't consider it yesterday. It was earlier in the morning. I did a burn kit team video for you guys, how to set up some heroes and some gear to running a burn team for Season 1 content when Beta 6 drops. In this video, we're going to deal with a little bit more of a robust setup with more options available and some more fun options available. And that is going to be the bleeders. So today, or in this particular video, we're going to deal with bleed teams. Now, bleeds are a little bit more available than burning. I would say by the burning gear available to us in Season 1 when Beta 6 drops, and we take into account the PvP seasons that are available and the spec ops that are available. It looks like we're looking at 2, 4, 6, about 8 pieces of gear or so that I covered in the burn video. And for this one, it looks like 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, close to about double that. Now, one of the items is a little bit in jeopardy. You may not be able to get it, as I'm not too sure exactly how the team is going to be implementing this one piece of gear. However, I have discussed this with them before, and I am being told that there is a plan for it, and that I was one of the people that actually brought it up. And hey, this is a good point. Yeah, we do need to look into this, because we don't want to screw anybody out of interesting gear. So, for the bleeders, when you search for bleeding on the old wiki, I'm using the older one on this, in case I need to reference any comments, we see things like some ISO 8s that work with bleeding. The thorned one was very good. This is for magic users, but you're not going to have this, as AISOs and EISOs will be in Season 2. But I did want to mention that the Thorn ISO is pretty good for your magic users, and one of the best AISOs in the business when it comes to bleeding is the Pulpy, or the Bloody Augmented ISO 8. This is the one that adds bleeds to unarmed melee attacks. Really, really good shit for somebody like Quicksilver. I don't know why it has this bug, can't be equipped to an action that exploits combos. I'm going to make note of that, and I'll actually ask the team about that and see if they care to honor that, if they think it's actually a valid thing, or maybe something that was a bug at the time and they want to fix it. But I'll try to get to the bottom of that. But we're really going to work on this gear and, of course, heroes down here, and the ones that will be available to us in Beta 6 when it drops. Currently on my agent for a bleed setup, I'm running the 2 anchor pieces. In the burning video, you heard me mention what I consider anchor pieces or core pieces of the kit, and that is gear that really ties the kit together. To quote the Big Lebowski, it's gear that ties the room together. The rocket pistol is by far one of the #1 items in a bleed setup. It is going to be in the store. It is a gold item. It is one of the best items you can get when you're doing PvE content in Beta 6, as it is a single target item, but it splashes bleeding and burning to all enemies. Good for setup for burn teams, amazing setup for bleed teams. It has a 1-round cooldown, and it's good single target. If you happen to be running infiltrator suits and you're stealthy, you can hit who you want with this thing. If you're not stealthy, yes, you may get protected against, but the splash damage is key. Aside from the splash damage, even if you don't want to run a burn team or bleed team, This gun just packs a really, really solid punch, so it is a good purchase. The Devourer, I've always said, is the hardest working weapon in the business. The consistency on the Devourer for follow-ups and counters, thanks to Blood Curse, is honestly one of the best things possible. You can negate Exposed on your agent by running a Mystic, but that will be much later in the game. But Exposed honestly isn't really that bad unless you're really trying to make your agent tank and you're doing tough content. But the fact that it hits all enemies and they all bleed is really good. However, that will sometimes cause some class benefits to go off. For example, if you swung the Devourer at a bunch of those BR moms and one of them is a scrapper and you're doing as an infiltrator, they are going to get their scrapper benefit. But you're not worrying about getting drained from Red Hulk or an Elite ISO. So the Devourer is one of the key components of a bleed kit. Right now, I'm running the Sabertooth Claws because it does 2 stacks of bleeds and it has a chance to counterattack. And the Synflayer is because I'm testing something. This isn't necessarily a bleed item unless you have Sin on the enemies. That's Ghost Rider, that's Zatanna, that's some aged gear, but I was doing this as a test for something else. More on that in a moment. So let's talk about some of the gear. So the Snicket is a pretty solid piece of gear. For a bleed team, you have a follow-up attack, you have Ravaged. Anytime you can combine other bleed adjacent things like Shred or Hemorrhaging on a bleeding piece of gear, it is always really good. Ravaged and bleeding on the same piece of gear is solid. It is bleed times 2, so that's 2 out of your 3 maximum stacks right there on one attack. And it is Chapter 4 Premium Mission. So that one is, honestly, really easy access. It's this one right over here. You just need to have Wolverine and you can go ahead and farm it. So that is a really good, solid early gear for bleed teams. Up next, in terms of the ones that are available, is the Binding Contract. The Binding Contract is in Spec Ops 4. It does cause bleed on the agent. However, things like Fist of the Colossus or the Techno-Organic Endoskeleton will prevent that bleed, and then later the Mystic will prevent that bleed. But it does bleeding times 3. It is reasonable damage, and it causes the maximum stack of bleeds instantly. And if you have the Devourer at that point, then you're likely going to very easily spread bleeds to the enemy team by hitting one person with the Binding Contract, and then the Devourer adding bleeds to everybody else. This is, I think, a really underrated piece of bleeding gear. You didn't really ever hear anybody talking about it when MAA was live. You didn't really see videos on it. I think everybody was like, oh, I don't want to cause my agent to bleed. Fuck that thing. But there's ways around it. And there are going to be at least a few items available to stop that when Beta 6 drops. And in all honesty, just one bleed on the agent isn't really that bad. So up next will be the custom Brutal Claw. We are skipping these as they're not particularly that great. This one, the Cat's Claw, which you're like, oh, that one looks good. It was a store item, and I'm pretty sure we won't see this one because 2014 is Season 2. But here is one that does Shred and Bleeding, which is pretty solid. As you know, Shred counts for bleeds on things that are unbleedable. So if you want to talk about like a Sentinel being made out of metal, they don't bleed. But if you hit them with Shred, you can then turn around and like exploit that bleed. Chain Tonfa is a store item. We may see this one in the store as this was a limited piece of gear. Ravaged, bleeding times 2, counterattack, and I think the counterattack would apply the bleeding. So if this one pops up in the store, I think that would be pretty solid. Chain Blade, some of these others are just basic. The Cruel Glaive is later on. Crooked Grin is Spec Ops 11. That's really, really deep in the Spec Ops. This one is a solid piece of bleeding kit gear because it's hemorrhaging and bleeding. That is one of the best things that you can do. If you can apply bleeds another way, especially say the binding contract, you're going to cause damage from the attack, and then you're going to cause the bleeding times 3 to proc right then and there. Pretty solid piece of gear, but it's really, really deep in the Spec Ops. You're going to get that one later. The Custom Brutal Claw is available in 185. So this one's pretty accessible. Ravaged and bleeding. Pretty common for your Season 1 gear to see bleeding and ravaged go together. The Foley's Tickler. This is a massive weapon for people to get, even if they're not running a bleed team. The reason why is remove buffs. This is really, really big when you go up against those street thugs that have the buff called tripping. Tripping was voted one of the most annoying buffs to deal with in Season 1, as it really limits the outright damage you can do on that mob to things like psychic and kind of using dots and everything like that. However, removing the buff with like a Scroll of Angelob or a remove buffs ability on a Foley's Heart Tickler is super, super handy. The Grecian Sigh is mediocre-ish damage, but it does have a counterattack and it does have bleeding. This is available in Chapter 2, so that won't be in Beta 6, unfortunately, but there are other sighs. The Hidden Blade, we've been telling people to avoid because of the fact that the Hidden Blade often bugs out combat unless you are running a female agent. This should be fixed by the time Beta 6 drops. The Custom Katana is another really solid one. This is one of the few where the damage it does is one of the main selling points on it. Yes, it does bleeds, but it has deadly crits and high crit, so this is really good with high accuracy agents like Scrapper agents, and it's available in 110.1. So you're going to get that in Season 1 over here. After the Custom Katana, you have the Custom Ripper. Another solid one because of the follow-up attack, kind of mediocre damage. But this one is really accessible in the fact that it comes from Chapter 5, Mission 4. That is that one over here, Desecration. So, pretty accessible early on. You do have to do it on challenge mode. That one's not that bad. Now, one of the other anchor items in a setup like this is the Custom Sword of the Barony. You may remember later in the game there was a buff called Red in the Tooth. That's basically you would heal up from attacking bleeding characters. Well, at this stage of the game, it was called Healing Strike. This one is available in 111.3. Unfortunately, during Beta 5.5 and Beta 5.6, which is what I have, it is this mission here. Omega Sentinel is a boss, and for some reason, aside from the one Spec Ops where you face her, Omega Sentinel during the season is bugged in a lot of the boss arenas. This should be working in Beta 6, but for now, I cannot farm this gear. I really wanted to show it off, because when you're putting out a lot of bleeds, being able to heal from it is really, really solid. It also has pretty decent single target damage. I would say once you get a bleed team going, go ahead and try to farm the Sword of the Barony. Now, I did not initially think of the Demon Talon when I was writing the list last night, because I thought it was way deeper into the game. It's actually not. It's in Spec Ops 10. And what's cool about this item is every time you use it with no cooldown, it grows in strength, and it can be used on a burning team and a bleeding team. The initial damage is a little low, but if you use it more and more, it's going to get better. It says it's based on Baron Strucker. When I first see that tooltip, I think of Misty Knight's arm, but it's not. It's actually tied to Baron Strucker. Of course, the Devourer, I mean, if you guys know me, you know I absolutely love this item. Devourer's great. The Feral Claw, we've already talked about. You want to try to get this in its golden mode. It is a piece of premium gear. It's store gear. It should show up in the store. I'm not 100% sure how exactly you're going to see it. Let's see, the custom Grecian Sai. Yeah, okay, that's the one that was chapter 2. I got to get that one off the list. One of the next really, really good ones is the Kazuri. And that one is down over here. The Kazuri is a store item. However, it's February of 2013, so that does fall within Season 1. It's not in my store now, and here it is. See, red in the tooth. Again, really, really good piece of gear for a bleeding team is it gives you some sustain. If you use something to put the bleeds out, like the Devourer or the Rocket Pistol, then you want to switch over and use the Kazuri. It's adamantium, so it bypasses defense and shields. Or, excuse me, it just bypasses defense. It doesn't go through shields. Has a counterattack. It does protect. The more you are healthy, similar to Wolverine, the more you protect. There's your red in the tooth, and it causes bleeding itself. Like the custom sword of the Barony, really, really good anchor item in bleed kits, although I'm not exactly too sure how it's going to wind up showing up in the store. The custom version of the monofilament blade is also pretty solid. That's in 4/4. It does bleeding, but it also does ignore defense. And the damage is okay, kind of medium. Not a bad item to farm early on. This one doesn't require getting up into the 10s or the 11s for your chapter and everything. So you can kind of get that one early. Of course, the Rocket Pistol, the saber-tooth claws, very, very, very low end damage. However, it has the counterattack, bleed ×2, which is helpful, and ravaged. Not a weapon you want to stick to for constant attacking, but a good way to get out a quick 2 stacks and then just basically use it as a passive. The Exsanguinator is a solid piece of gear, and this is one that I wanted to talk about. This is what I hinted at in the beginning of the video. The Marvel XP rewards, you'll see that its availability was part of that old program called the Marvel XP rewards. This was where if you played some other games, you could build things up within this game. You had the Fantastic Fix, the TOE, Das Boot, Exsanguinator. I have made the team aware of this. We have talked about it, and they are going to try to work it into the game, as this was a very highly online piece of the game back in the day. It required doing that. I think that Hulk game that was on Android and iPads, where depending on what direction you swipe, you were either blocking or you were like attacking up, you were attacking from the side and everything. Avengers Initiative, maybe, I think it was what it was. So they are aware of that, and they will, of course, try to work it into the game because that doesn't exist anymore. Of course, if you want to use items, the kunai barrages are really good. The shredders. Crippler does a set of debuffs, so you could use that. The Crippler is very overpowered. Same thing for the Vibranium Frag Grenade. For your heroes available to you in Season 1. Black Cat, especially Claw's Black Cat, is extremely good. Black Knight, which you will be able to earn as a unlock simply by playing the story missions. Ebony Blade says for the team, they get Blood Curse. Blood Curse is one of the best buffs in the game when you're doing a bleed team because right over here, allies slashing attacks apply bleeding. So, if you are using Black Knight, and currently in beta 5.6, that particular aspect is not working correctly. The buff goes out, but it's not adding to it. See here, Blood Curse. What Blood Curse does is if the slashing attack does not apply bleeds when your friendly team gets Blood Curse, it will cause bleeds. So for people like Sif and Spiral, those who often had a lot of slashing attacks that didn't apply bleed for whatever playdom logic reason, Blood Knight, and there's why Sabertooth's Claws are good, by the way. And that's why Black Knight is good. That poor dude over there already has 3 stacks of bleeds, and we haven't even manually attacked him. I've done 1 attack, and that was to attack the Pyro over here. 3 stacks, 1 stack, 3 stacks. There you go. The Synflayer, this is what I was testing with Black Knight. It's a slashing axe. What should be happening is I should be applying a stack of bleeds because I have Blood Curse on me from Black Knight. Unfortunately, as you can see here, no bleeds are going out. It's supposed to work. I've told the team about it. They'll be looking into it, but that's the value of Black Knight and why he's so good for bleed teams. If the slashing attack doesn't apply bleeds naturally, now it will. If the slashing attack actually does apply bleeds, what's going to happen is now it applies 2 stacks. So that Devour over here, right in my agent's hand, the one that gives me a lot of free attacks that cause bleeds, would start causing 2 stacks of bleeds every time my agent swung it, whether I was doing it manually or doing it as a follow-up or doing it as a counter. The Devourer Blood Curse combo was one of my favorite things in the original game. Loved using it when doing PvE. Not exactly something that I would have considered PvP worthy, but really, really good for PvE. So, Black Knight, major component of a good bleed team. Same thing for Claw's Black Cat. Black Panther will be available to you. I don't count Constrictor because it's if he uses an item. Deadpool, it's a percentage chance, with the exception of sharp, pointy things. Which may... That's weird. Anyway, yeah, that's a little bit strange over there. It's just still better. Maybe that... Hold on. Is that from his alt? No. Okay. Yeah, I'm not too sure why it's listing Deadpool there, to be honest. It is possible on No Holds Barred because of the random debuffs, but I'm still surprised at sharp, pointy things being listed there. Fandral, when you get him later, he's an instant 3 stacks of bleeds when he does the Chandelier drop, but that's much later. Hawkeye is random. I don't count him. Iron Man's missile bombardments. If you have the Heartbreaker suit, aka MKA-42, it changes missile bombardment into doing burning and bleeding, which of course is really, really good. And then Digger missiles just go back to the burning. So he does have the one uniform that essentially makes him like the rocket pistol. So moving on from Iron Man, Nightcrawler will get it. He isn't doing it in the betas, but it will be fixed in beta 6. I don't count Scarlet Witch. Sif can do it on one ability, but when paired with a Black Knight, she can do it on most of her abilities. Tigra is available. You will be able to do bleeds off of Tigra. And that's her level 1. And she does shred, which is pretty cool. Her kit also includes a quick action swipe, which allows her to hemorrhage immediately. So you can quick action, do the hemorrhage, and then go back and do another ability. And of course, Wolverine and X-23. So leading into a set of bleeders is really, really solid. And when you start getting into using Black Knight and the Devour and everything, combat is almost just auto. First, you could see Black Knight as a reasonable tank. He does a lot of tanking where he just dashes forward and absorbs the attack. He is a tactician, so he does have some problems with infiltrators, but when you have blasters, hit extra turns really, really help accelerate Black Knight. If you have really good slashing gear, that you like the damage available on the slashing gear, but always lament the fact that it doesn't cause bleeds, get yourself a Black Knight. You may want to call him a loony if you catch the movie reference over there, but he is a major, major boon to bleed teams, and it gets to the point where he adds so much extra attacks when the enemy team is bleeding. It's almost like using autopilot combat over here, and I'm so happy to show you Black Knight in action. I unlocked him over the weekend and was waiting until today's stream to actually... I gained the ability to unlock him over the weekend, and I was waiting until the stream so that I could unlock him and start using him. So here you can see the enemy Hydra Cannon only has 1 bleed. Now, because this is a slashing attack, it should add a bleed because of Black Knight. Unfortunately, it won't, but when Beta 6 drops, it absolutely should. And then anything else that people do that are slashing will get a bonus. All right, and there he goes, jumping in, causing enough damage. There you go. Combat's over. So there you go, guys. There are some bleed teams. Can you take it into PvP when Beta 6 drops? Yeah, I'm sure you could. Some of the setups are really good for PvP. You won't be dealing with a Mystic on anybody, so you will be able to bleed relatively early on. I'm not too sure if any teams will have a Techno-Organic Skeleton or a Colossus Fist, but that's really the only bleed immunity you're going to see in early PvP. Really, it's just good for PvP and getting through your combat quick, especially the ones where the enemies have a little bit less hit points, like not challenge mode and everything. So, hope you guys enjoyed the video. Hope between the burn teams and the bleed teams, you've got some good idea of some things you can start running when Beta 6 drops, some targets to go and farm, some heroes to unlock. Hopefully my hype around certain things like the rocket pistol encourage you to get something like that. I think it is a massively good agent weapon and allows him to be really competitive in PvE combat rather than just relying on the heroes all the time for damage. So let me know what you think down in the comment section below, and I will see you guys later. Have a good one.